here's Brody Brazil.
So this is a video about the largest player contracts ever awarded by the A's. And I already know what you're thinking. Yeah, the commitments, the years, the dollar amounts, they're not going to be significant nor impressive. And yeah, compared to other teams, you're correct about that. But I also need to start this video with two disclaimers. And just consider the last, 23 years of A's baseball alone. Since the turn of the century, this team has won a lot of games. They've been very competitive in most of their regular seasons. They've had streaks. They've won 97 games a couple years. They've made the playoffs. Unfortunately, they haven't advanced as far as they would have liked in the postseason, but they've been very much in the mix despite not spending nearly as much as some other franchises. There's also this to spell out during the span of discussion here. They've gone through multiple general managers. They've gone through multiple different ownership groups and entities. So it's not just one individual making these decisions. Okay, that being established, let's kind of start at the very beginnings of this. Only 3 big league teams have never awarded a $100 million value contract. Those teams, Kansas City Royals, Chicago White Sox, and the Oakland A's. In fact, if I do the math, maybe either of those two other teams, maybe they've even paid a single player on multiple contracts $100 million or more. Is that 9 figures? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's 9 figures. But I don't even know if the Oakland A's have ever even paid one individual player $100 million, even over multiple contracts. And look, the $100 million figure, what is that? Is that everything? Does that spell out history? Like, is Ricky Henderson's value more than $100 million at some point? It's hard to convert past to present, but this is kind of the threshold we're using in the modern day. And to say that of the 30 teams that are existing right now, only 3 have, even Tampa is in this conversation. Minnesota Twins have awarded a $100 million contract, but these 3 teams, look at all the small market teams are not here, but here's 3 that are. Kansas City, the White Sox, and the A's. And again, for the A's, it's not just a single $100 million contract. I don't know that any one player has ever made that amount from the franchise. So let's take a look at the largest player contracts on the other side of things right now. The A's have never offered $100 million. Mike Trout got 12 years and $427 million from the Angels. Yeah, that's the biggest contract in baseball history. Mookie Betts right behind him, 12 years, $365. Aaron Judge with the Yankees, 9 years at $360 million. Manny Machado, $350 for 11 years. I forgot the M. Francisco Lindor, $341 for 10 years. And Tatis Jr., $340 million across 14 seasons. So yeah, now you can kind of see the difference even between $100 million, which is the threshold we're discussing here, versus some of the top earners in baseball. Yeah, it is possible certain teams commit a lot of money to individuals. And does it always work? That's a whole separate side question here. Look, we've even changed the graphics for this. I prepared all of this for a video actually this past offseason, but I thought, hey, right now is a really good time to do it. Does what you spend actually translate into winning? Now, this is from the 2022 regular season. These are the top spenders, and this is where they finish in terms of their regular season overall MLB record. Dodgers spent the most last year. They had baseball's best record. Mets spent the second most, 3rd best record. Yankees, 3rd most spending, 5th best record. Now, in reality, who is playing for a regular season title? That's not what you play for. You play to ultimately get in the playoffs and, win a World Series. But I'm just talking about the overall success of a baseball team across a large sample size. 162 games. That should give you an indication of whether a team is good or not. And so you can see the correlation here of all these teams at the $200 million or more level, various levels of success. Like the White Sox got to be pretty disappointed to spend $203 million and finish middle of the pack in baseball. Or the Red Sox to spend $212 and finish on the bottom half of baseball. Even the Padres last year, disappointment. Same thing with the Phillies. There is a correlation at the top. There's no question about that. But then you get into this next tier of baseball teams last season that spent over 150, which, by the way, 150 last year was about the league average. And here you start to see some consistency. The Astros finished second, Oh, yeah, they also won the entire World Series. Atlanta had the fourth best record. They're here, the Blue Jays, the Cardinals. So there is something to be said about at least spending to the league average, of which right now, this season, 2023, the Oakland A's are $100 million below the league average of all the teams that are spending on players. They're $100 million below 161 right now. But you can kind of see this is a happy place for a lot of teams to live. But look, there's still disappointment. The Rangers, the Cubs, the Giants of last season, the Angels of almost every season. They spent $180 million last year to finish 9 spots from last place in all of baseball. So look, my point here is that this video can be about what the A's do and certainly do not spend. It doesn't always work out year to year. But more on that here in just a second. These are the teams that spent $100 million or more. So they're all in the 9-figure amount. And you can see, yeah, the Nats, worst in baseball. Tigers, Rockies, Twins, all struggling team. The Reds, all in that same category. So now you're just above $100 million. It's not doing it. And now here you are at less than $100 million, and you get the 28th, 29th, 26th teams in the league, the 20th, the 22nd. I mean, there are some surprises here. The Guardians, even the Orioles, middle of the pack at the lowest spending team. It is possible that some of these teams can exist to be competitive in the end. But here's the twofold part about that. And I thought Seattle was on here. Maybe they were on the prior slide. You can have teams that are on the ascent, that are getting better, that have young players that don't cost a lot, that are competitive. There's two ways to be competitive. Spend a bunch and get the right players in and commit to them for a long period of time, or have homegrown players who are cheap, essentially, at first, and then cost you more as their situation dictates and requires it. You're going to have to pay for those players. So you can't sustain long-term success in baseball unless you spend to a certain level. You can have it in spurts, like we've seen with the A's, 2012, 13, 14. 2018, 19, and 20, and almost half of 21. You can have spurts, but you cannot have sustained success in Major League Baseball unless you are one of the mid-level to upper-level spenders. And again, I'm not even saying you need to be in that 250 or more category, but definitely more than 100 and probably more than $150 million to just assure yourself of being competitive. So that's my look at last season. Now let's get to actually what you're here for. The top 5 A's player contracts in terms of value. Checking in at number 5. This was one of my favorites in my very early years to cover. Jason Kendall, he was a backstop. He had all the attributes, like personally and professionally, of a catcher. Gritty, just grinder. Always had the Roy Kent look on his face. He and Mark Kotsay were both similar. Like, not necessarily in a bad mood, but just really serious about everything they did. Jason Kendall was definitely in that category. He came to the A's already on, so he didn't sign this contract with the A's, but he was on a 6-year, $60 million contract when traded from the Pirates in November of 2004. Ended up spending 2.5 years in Oakland, and during that span on the contract that Pittsburgh arranged for him, he made $36 million in 2.5 years. Ended up hitting 271 with the A's. I mean, good average. The power was never really there in 373 games, but that's fine. He did his job, no question about that. I will say I distinctly remember one of those home runs because Ray Fosse was on the call. And as the ball was sailing near the fence, all you could hear was Ray in the background saying, get up, ball, get up. And Kendall did hit the home run. So Jason Kendall of the mid 2000s, 04 and 05, of 05, 06, and maybe a little bit of 07. Jason Kendall, the 5th highest earner in Oakland history. Jermaine Dye checking in at number 4, the Bay Area zone, NorCal zone. Jermaine Dye, 3-year, $34 million extension in 2002. Now, he was traded from the Royals, is it in 01, after 01? Man, it's 20 plus years ago, I'm forgetting, but traded to the White Sox after he was done with the A's. He would go on to win a World Series in Chicago, and he was part of that 2002 streak team. And then, unfortunately, injuries hampered him in 2003. He's only able to play 65 games in 2003. But a 3-year, $34 million deal checks in at number 4 here. You're seeing we're doing this in reverse order. Number 4 on our list. KD, Khris Davis. Oh, I loved when he rounded third with the salute. I was there the day that he signed officially. I mean, I saw him write his name on the paper. April of 2019, he signed a 2-year, $33.5 million extension. And again, to think that that's the third biggest contract the A's have ever awarded, and you just saw the list before with Trout and Judge on there. It's amazing dollar amounts that the A's just don't do that. 2 years, $33.5 million. Now, this comes off his time with the A's where he was on 4 separate 1-year deals. 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 starting in 16. And all he did in 16 was hit 42 dingers, 43 in 2017 and 48 homers in 2018. Obviously, the career didn't really go as planned from there. By mid-2020, he was not a member of the Oakland A's anymore. But Khris Davis at number 3 here on our list. Oh, Coco Crisp. Big part of the A's in those 12, 13, and 14 years. The Bernie lean, Mr. Bernie lean himself, one of the biggest leaners they had. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. So with the A's for a significant period of time, 3 different contracts he signed actually with Oakland. And there were club options on all of them during that span. So I think it was like a 2-year, 2-year, and a 2-year. But all of those contracts and all of those options, which 2 of the 3 options were picked up, were worth $52.5 million. So finally, we're getting to half of that $100 million threshold, but that's number 2. And I'll tell you who number 1 is in just a second. By the way, do you know right now? Don't fast forward. Do you know who's number 1? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But Coco's starting salary with the A's was $5 million. By the time he departed Oakland, he was making $11 million per season. Okay, do I have a drum roll on here? I feel like that would be... Yep, no. Oh, wait, I do. I took way too long on that. All right, at number 1, the highest contract ever awarded to an Oakland A's player, Eric Chavez, earned $84.2 million in Oakland across 13 seasons. So there's your answer, right? I said before, A's have never awarded a $100 million contract. They've never had a player make $100 million in multiple contracts during their time. $84.2 million, 13 seasons with the A's from the 90s into the 2000s and ultimately into 2010. Obviously, the back injury really hampered him. He went on to play a couple more seasons in New York, but 6 years, $66 million is the biggest A's player contract ever awarded. And this is Eric Chavez, who, and I will always say it differently. Eric Chavez, even he could never tell me, like, what's the right way to say it? Multiple different pronunciations. I want to settle on one. Xavi, how about that? Xavi had 6 straight Gold Gloves from 01 to 06, but would you believe it or not? Eric Chavez, never a big league all-star. In the same way that Mark Ellis never won an American League Gold Glove at second base. Robbery, I tell you, robbery. Incompetence by baseball, but also robbery in this case for Xavi to never win there's one of his Gold Gloves, but to never be an all-star just was amazing in reverse. So there you go. Eric Chavez, the highest paid A's player, but $66 million, nowhere near $100 million for a contract. And I realize that was many years ago and salaries have increased. And all of this is relative to time. But he earned $84.2 million. Maybe in today's age, maybe that would be the $100 million value. But look, just goes to show you, spending money is not everything all the time, but over the long term, there definitely is a correlation. And it's just not what the A's have done over multiple front offices, multiple ownership groups. It's not something they've done. So there's definitely both sides of it. I wanted to hopefully see it fairly, make all those points. Let me know what you think about this video in the comment section below. Thumbs up on it since you watched, here all the way to the end. I appreciate that. And don't forget, subscribe to this channel so that I can see you next time.